The wind swept dust through the hollow streets of Judgment Hill, a lawless frontier town where justice was bought and mercy was outlawed. On the crooked wooden porch of the old courthouse, 4 young Apache women stood with ropes around their necks. Their dresses were torn, their faces streaked with dust and fear. They had been accused of crimes they never committed, branded as raiders by men who had stolen their land and livestock. A crowd of rough settlers and drunken outlaws jeered from the street below, waiting for the noose to tighten. Above them, a crooked sign swayed. Judgment Hall. At the edge of town, a lone rider appeared, his silhouette cutting sharp against the midday sun. He was a cowboy, lean and weathered, with a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his eyes. Across his back, a rifle and shotgun gleamed in the light, and at his hips, 2 revolvers rested easy but ready. He rode in slow, his horse's hooves crunching through the silence that spread like wildfire. The crowd grew restless as whispers traveled. "Who's that?" "Strangers got no business here." "Best ride on, cowboy. Ain't your fight." But the cowboy didn't flinch, his eyes fixed on the 4 captives. The women stood proud despite the ropes, their dark eyes filled with a fire that even fear could not put out. The town's so-called judge, a fat man in a tattered coat, raised his hand to silence the mob. "These Apache girls been found guilty of raidin' and thievin'. By law of this town, they hang." The cowboy dismounted, boots striking the dirt with the weight of a man who'd carried too many burdens across too many miles. He spoke low, but the words carried like thunder. "This ain't law. This is murder." Laughter rippled through the crowd, but it died quickly when the cowboy's hand drifted near his holster. The judge sneered. "Best keep ridin', stranger, or you'll swing right beside him." The cowboy stepped forward, his gaze locked on the gallows. His voice was calm, steady, but edged like steel. "Cut him down, now." The air tightened. Fingers hovered near pistols. The crowd waited for the first spark to ignite the firestorm. And in that tense silence, the 4 Apache women lifted their chins, hope flickering in their eyes for the first time. They did not know this man, but they knew he was about to risk everything for their lives. The story of their freedom, and the long road that lay beyond, was about to begin. The sun burned hot over Judgment Hill, but the heat that pressed down wasn't just from the sky. It was from the silence, heavy and waiting to crack. The cowboy stood in the middle of the street, dust swirling at his boots, his eyes locked on the 4 Apache women still tied at the gallows. The so-called judge licked his lips and waved a meaty hand toward the rope. "Do it," he barked to the hangman. The cowboy's voice cut across the square, low and sharp like a blade. "Touch that rope and you'll be the first to fall." The crowd roared with jeers, some stepping back, others pushing forward, eager to see a bloodbath. The hangman froze, his hand trembling inches from the lever. The judge's face twisted in fury. "You don't run this town, stranger," he spat. "We do." The cowboy's hand twitched, and in one smooth, practiced motion, his revolver cleared leather. A single gunshot split the air, and the hangman's hat flew from his head, the bullet punching a hole through the wooden post beside him. Gasps swept the crowd. No one moved. The cowboy didn't blink. "I said, cut him down." Tension snapped like a whip. Several outlaws shoved through the crowd, guns raised. But before they could aim, the cowboy had already shifted, firing twice, each shot finding its mark. 2 men hit the dirt hard. Chaos erupted. Women screamed, horses reared, and the crowd scattered for cover as the square exploded with gunfire. Bullets tore splinters from posts, shattered windows, and sent townsfolk diving behind barrels and wagons. The 4 Apache women struggled against the ropes, choking as the nooses pulled tighter with every frantic movement. The cowboy sprinted forward, firing as he ran. He dropped another outlaw near the saloon doors, then dove behind a horse trough, reloading with calm, steady hands despite the storm of lead. A brave townsman tried to cut the women loose, but a bullet struck the ground near his feet, sending him fleeing. The judge cowered on the porch, screaming orders, his face red with rage. The cowboy kicked over the trough, sending water spilling into the dust, and used it as cover. He sighted the gallows, breathing slow, waiting for his moment. 3 more gunmen rushed from the alley, shouting. The cowboy's rifle spoke once, twice, 3 times, each crack of thunder dropping a man before his boots hit the ground. With the path clear, he charged up the steps of the gallows. His knife flashed, slicing through the coarse ropes. One by one, the Apache women fell forward, gasping for breath, coughing, their eyes wide with shock and relief. "Move!" the cowboy shouted. The women stumbled down the steps, their bare feet hitting the dirt, but strength was already returning to their limbs. They ran toward the edge of town, ducking low as stray bullets whizzed past. The cowboy stayed behind, his revolvers blazing. Every step he took, he moved backward, covering their escape. His face was stone, his hands steady, his eyes cold with purpose. The judge shrieked like a cornered animal. "Kill him! Kill them all!" But the townsfolk weren't so quick anymore. The crowd's courage had bled out into the dust. Outlaws hesitated, knowing too well what kind of man they were facing. Finally, the cowboy leapt from the gallows, rolling across the dirt, and sprinted after the women. They had reached the corral where horses stood restless, spooked by the gunfire. With quick hands, the cowboy cut their ties and threw saddles rough over their backs. "Ride!" he barked. The women climbed onto the horses, some unsteady, but fire in their eyes now replaced fear. The cowboy mounted his own steed, rifle strapped across his back, and spurred hard. Behind them, dust and fury rose from Judgment Hill. Outlaws scrambled to give chase, bullets sparking against the canyon rocks as the riders thundered into the open desert. The cowboy looked back once, just once, at the crooked sign over the gallows. "Judgment Hall," it read. He knew this wasn't the end. The town wouldn't let them go so easy. But for now, the women were alive. For now, they had a chance. And in the desert, sometimes a chance was all a man could ask for. The desert stretched wide and merciless, red stone cliffs jutting into the sky like jagged teeth. The sun burned high overhead, and the only sound was the pounding of hooves as the cowboy and the 4 freed Apache women rode hard across the flats. Dust trailed behind them like smoke from a fire. The women clung to their horses, breath ragged but eyes alive, no longer captives but fugitives with a sliver of hope. One of them glanced back, her braid whipping in the wind. "They're coming," she said, voice tight. The cowboy didn't need to look. He could already feel it, the thunder of pursuit closing fast. Outlaws from Judgment Hill, maybe a dozen or more, armed and hungry for blood. "Keep low," he called, urging his horse faster. "We make the canyon. It's the only chance." The canyon yawned ahead, a narrow throat of stone cutting through the desert. They plunged inside, hooves clattering against rock, the walls rising higher, the air cooling with shadow. But it was a trap as much as a refuge. If the outlaws caught them inside, there'd be nowhere to run. Behind them, the outlaws' shouts echoed against the stone, mixed with the sharp cracks of gunfire. Bullets sparked off the canyon walls, ricocheting wild. One of the Apache women cried out as her horse stumbled, but the cowboy swung down, lifted her back into the saddle, and slapped the reins. "Ride! Don't stop!" They pushed deeper into the canyon until the path narrowed, funneling into a place where the cliffs leaned so close it seemed the sky itself was cut in half. Here the cowboy pulled hard on his reins, bringing his horse to a halt. The women looked at him, fear and confusion in their eyes. "We can't outrun 'em," he said, voice low but steady. "We stand here." He swung down from the saddle, boots hitting stone. With quick, practiced movements, he checked his rifle, spun the cylinder on his revolvers, and loaded each with steady hands. His eyes met theirs. Not cold, not soft, but unshakable. "You want to live. You fight with me." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the eldest of the 4, a woman with sharp eyes, and braided hair streaked with beads, nodded and gripped a fallen branch, whittled sharp like a spear. Another picked up rocks, her jaw set tight. They were not warriors by choice, but by need. The cowboy positioned them against the canyon wall, where the shadows gave cover. He himself stepped into the open, rifle raised, waiting for the dust to appear. And then it came. Outlaws poured into the canyon, faces twisted with anger, guns gleaming in the sun. Their leader, a scarred man with a wide black hat, bellowed, "There he is! Drop 'em, boys!" Gunfire split the air. The cowboy fired first. His rifle cracked and the lead outlaw toppled from his saddle, crashing into the dust. The canyon erupted with thunder. Horses screaming, men shouting, bullets whining off the walls. The Apache women crouched low, stones flying from their hands with deadly aim, striking one outlaw across the temple, another in the chest. The eldest jabbed her makeshift spear at a rider who got too close, toppling him from his horse. The cowboy moved like water, rolling from cover to cover, his revolvers blazing in both hands. Each shot rang true, each step deliberate. He dropped one outlaw, then another, his face calm amid the storm. Still, they were outnumbered. For every man who fell, two more pressed forward. A bullet grazed the cowboy's arm, tearing blood through his sleeve, but he didn't falter. He fired again, reloading with teeth clenched, his back to the canyon wall. At last, the scarred outlaw himself rode forward, rifle raised. "You shoulda kept ridin', stranger," he snarled. The cowboy leveled his revolver, eyes steady. "And left them to die? Not my way." Both men fired at once. The outlaw's shot splintered rock inches from the women. The cowboy's bullet struck true. The scarred man toppled from his horse, dust swallowing him whole. The remaining outlaws froze, their courage bleeding away. One by one, they turned tail, spurring their horses out of the canyon, leaving their dead and wounded behind. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged breaths of the women and the slow drip of blood from the cowboy's arm. He holstered his gun and leaned against the stone, his face drawn but unbroken. The eldest woman stepped forward, laying a hand on his shoulder. Her voice was low, steady. "You saved us. Twice." The cowboy shook his head. "Not saved, just bought us time." He looked toward the far end of the canyon where sunlight spilled like a promise. "They'll be back, stronger. We need to move." And so, together, cowboy and Apache women, they gathered what they could, mounted their horses, and rode deeper into the desert, shadows long behind them. Ahead lay the unknown, new dangers, new enemies, and, perhaps, new allies. But for the first time, they rode not as captor and captive, but as a band bound by survival. Night draped itself across the desert, the stars burning sharp above the cliffs like 1,000 watchful eyes. The cowboy and the 4 Apache women rode slow now, their horses weary, their bodies bent with exhaustion. Blood crusted the cowboy's sleeve where the bullet had grazed him, but he gave no thought to his wound. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, on the faint glow of fire in the distance. The women recognized it first. One whispered, her voice hushed but trembling with hope, "Our people." They pressed on, and soon the faint outline of an Apache camp took shape. Teepees ringed around low fires, the scent of sage smoke drifting through the cool air. Children stirred, elders rose, and warriors stepped forward, spears and rifles in hand. The 4 women slid from their saddles, stumbling forward, tears streaking their dirt-stained cheeks as they embraced mothers, sisters, kin, who had thought them lost forever. The camp filled with the sound of cries and prayers of gratitude. The cowboy stood apart, his shadow long against the firelight. He did not step forward, did not call for thanks. He only watched, silent, as if he were a ghost passing through someone else's dream. An elder approached him, tall, with silver hair braided tight, his face carved deep with years. His eyes studied the cowboy with the weight of judgment. "You brought them back," the elder said. "Why?" The cowboy's voice was steady, quiet. Because no one else would. The elder nodded slowly, but his eyes narrowed. The men who took them, they will not stop. You know this. The cowboy met his gaze. I know. The camp offered food and shelter. The women sat near the fires, speaking in low voices, retelling their capture, their days in Judgment Hill, the noose waiting for them. Each word drew anger from their kin, anger that turned to fire in their eyes. But not all welcomed the cowboy's presence. Some warriors whispered that he was white, a man of the same world that had brought so much death to their people. Others demanded he leave before his presence brought more trouble. The eldest of the 4 women, the one who had fought beside him in the canyon, stood tall before them all. He is no murderer. He risked his life for us when none of you were there. The words cut like steel. The camp grew silent, some nodding, others scowling. The cowboy simply sat, cleaning his rifle, saying nothing. That night, as the fires burned low and the camp grew quiet, the cowboy sat alone at the edge of the circle. His horse grazed nearby, and the desert wind carried whispers through the grass. His eyes stayed sharp, watching the shadows. It was then he saw them, far off on the ridges, flickers of torchlight moving like hungry wolves. He knew the outlaws hadn't given up. Worse, they'd brought more men. The cowboy rose, striding quickly back into camp. He woke the elder, who roused the warriors. Panic stirred, but the cowboy's voice cut through like iron. "They'll be here by dawn," he said. "If you fight them out in the open, you'll lose. If you make a stand, you can win." Some scoffed, some argued, but the elder saw the truth in his eyes. "Then we prepare," the old man said. And so, through the long hours of night, the Apache camp turned into a fortress. Spears were sharpened, rifles loaded, barricades of logs and stone set along the canyon pass. The 4 women moved among their people, no longer captives but symbols of survival. Their courage stoked the fire in every heart. The cowboy checked his revolvers, loaded fresh rounds into his rifle, and tightened the strap on his holster. His movements were calm, but his mind burned with a simple truth. Come dawn, they would face hell. And as the first glow of morning touched the sky, the distant sound of hooves rose, deep, rolling thunder carrying with it an army of outlaws, greedy for blood and revenge. The cowboy stood at the front of the camp, his shadow stretching long in the pale light. The 4 Apache women stood beside him, each armed with bow, spear, or rifle. The elder raised his hand, voice strong. "This is our land, our home. We will not bow." The cowboy's eyes narrowed at the sight of the enemy cresting the ridge. He drew his revolver, spun the chamber once, and clicked it shut. "Then we make our stand," he said. And the desert held its breath. The first light of dawn bled across the desert sky, painting the horizon in crimson and gold. The outlaws came like a storm, their horses kicking up thunder, rifles raised, torches burning. They were more than 30 strong, faces twisted with greed and hate. In the canyon below, the Apache camp stood waiting. Warriors crouched behind barricades of stone and timber. Women and elders stood back, clutching weapons, ready to defend what was theirs. And at the very front, where the pass narrowed into a bottleneck, stood the cowboy. His hat pulled low, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. The 4 Apache women stood near him, their courage burning like fire. One knocked an arrow, another gripped a rifle, and the youngest clutched a spear so tightly her knuckles turned white. They had faced death before. This time they would fight it. The outlaw leader, a scar-faced brute named Crowder, rode to the front of his men. His laughter echoed off the canyon walls. "You should have run, stranger," he called out. "Now you'll die with the savages you're so fond of." The cowboy's reply was steady, quiet, but it carried like thunder. "Then come and try." And with that, the canyon exploded. Gunfire cracked, arrows whistled, and smoke filled the morning air. The first wave of outlaws charged, but the narrow pass funneled them into the waiting rifles of the Apaches. Horses screamed, men tumbled, dust rose thick, but still they came on. The cowboy fired with calm precision, every shot finding its mark. His revolvers thundered until the chambers clicked empty. Then he snatched his rifle and kept shooting. The 4 women fought beside him, one dropping an outlaw clean from the saddle with a rifle shot, another driving a spear through a man who charged the barricade. But the outlaws pressed hard. Their numbers surged like a black tide, and soon the barricades began to splinter. Smoke and fire filled the camp, the cries of battle echoing through the canyon. The cowboy took a bullet across his shoulder, staggering, but he stayed on his feet. His jaw clenched, his hands steady. He fought on. At his side, the eldest Apache woman shouted, rallying her people. "Stand! This is our home! Fight for it!" The tide began to turn. The Apaches struck with fury, their arrows finding gaps in the enemy line, their warriors moving swift and silent through the smoke. One outlaw after another fell, their charge broken against the courage of those who refused to yield. Finally, only Crowder remained. He dismounted, his rifle empty, his knife gleaming in the morning light. He came at the cowboy with a roar, slashing wild. The cowboy met him head-on. The 2 men crashed together, trading blows, fists cracking, knives flashing. Crowder was bigger, stronger, his rage boiling over. But the cowboy fought with calm, relentless grit. At last, Crowder lunged, his knife aimed for the cowboy's chest. In that instant, the eldest Apache woman loosed an arrow. It struck true, sinking deep into Crowder's side. He staggered, eyes wide with shock. The cowboy finished it, wrenching the knife from his hand and driving a fist into his jaw. Crowder fell, crashing to the dirt, his fight ended. Silence fell. The smoke drifted. The last of the outlaws lay dead or fled, their thunder silenced by the courage of those they sought to destroy. The Apaches raised their voices in cries of victory. Their camp saved, their people safe. The 4 women stood together, battered but unbroken, their chains of fear forever shattered. The cowboy, bloodied and weary, holstered his revolvers and stepped back. He said little, for words were never his way. The elder approached, his voice solemn. "You came as a stranger. You leave as kin. Our people will remember this." The cowboy nodded once. His eyes lingered on the 4 women, their faces lit with pride, their spirits free. Then he turned, mounted his horse, and rode toward the horizon. The sun rose full over the desert, washing the land in gold. Behind him, the Apache camp stood strong, united, no longer bound by fear. Ahead of him, the long road stretched on, endless and uncertain. But one truth burned steady in his heart. Sometimes a man doesn't fight for reward or for glory. Sometimes he fights because it's right. And so the cowboy rode on, a lone shadow against the morning light, a legend carried by the wind, and a story the desert would never forget.